guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, I'm pretty sure you figured this one out by now, but it's going to be part 6 of our ukulele build. Well, as I said in last week's show, this is a big week for the show with a lot of things coming together. And it's all going to start off first thing by unclamping those linings that we bent up in the original form last week. Well, here we have the form, and we just want to go ahead and remove all of these clothespins. Those walnut pieces that we bent up are definitely dry by now. And once we get all of these clothespins and clamps taken out of here, what we're going to end up doing is applying glue to them and gluing them in place against the sides of the instrument. I'm just going to show you what we ended up with here, and this of course would be the lining. So you want to apply the glue, as I said, but along this back edge, glue it and clamp it with the clothespins or whatever clamps to hold it tight on both the front and the back of the ukulele. Well, we've allowed those lining pieces to all glue up and dry up, and now what we need to do is remove all those clamps, remove all those clothespins and put them back before the wife finds out that I took them. And just like we did when we first glued the heel and neck blocks in place, we need to get that same 3/4 MDF with the sandpaper on it and sand all of those lining pieces flush with the edges of the ukulele. At this point in time in the whole process, you should have something that looks like this. And you'll notice it's nice and tight all the way around here. This lining is adhered really well, and it's very, very flush. Let me see if I can just focus in on that. It's very flush to the body of the ukulele. And what we need to do now is lay this particular body that we've got here on top of our blank. You may have noticed through the video at some point in time that I have tape inside, blue painter's tape here with an arrow pointing up. That's just showing me where the front of the ukulele is, just so I can keep everything in check and make sure that I'm always working knowing what orientation this instrument is in. The next thing you want to do now is take the blank for the front of your ukulele, which I've said before is called the soundboard. And what you're going to do is line up your seam marks here, your butt joint laminations, with the center mark that you drew last week. Once you get it lined up and you're content and happy that it's lined up correctly, trace out the entire inner and outer profile of your ukulele onto your soundboard blank. Now, the reason that you want to add inside and outside profiles here is because we have some bracing to put on the inside of the ukulele, and we really don't want to have it interfere with anything inside. So we need to make sure that we know exactly where all the pieces start and stop. So go ahead and trace the inside and outside profiles of your ukulele. Well, the time has now come to put some markings on the soundboard, and you've just finished tracing out, of course, the inner and outer profiles, and we need to mark for our sound hole. So what we're going to do is from the top of the ukulele on that center mark that we put on there earlier, or your lamination mark if that's the case, from the top of the ukulele down, you want to put a mark at 3 9/30 of an inch. And that is going to represent the center mark for your sound hole. Well, the next marks that we need to place on the soundboard will be for the bracing of the soundboard. And those particular marks are, well, you're going to measure them from the top of the ukulele and you'll be putting a horizontal line at that point. But the whole point of these braces on the soundboard is to be rigid enough to provide support for the stress and the pressure of the strings on that front board, but as well they have to be flexible enough to allow the soundboard to vibrate once, you know, the strings are played. Without vibration, of course, there is no sound, and you want that vibration in your soundboard to project the sound out of the sound hole of your instrument. So I'm going to cut them out of poplar. And is it the definitive wood for this? Is it the proper wood for this? I don't really know. This is a big learning experience for me too. So I'm trying to think of what type of wood would provide the requirements that I'm looking for. And I'm thinking poplar might do it. So poplar is the wood of choice in this particular build for the bracing of my soundboard. So you've decided on what material you want to use here for the soundboard bracing. And as we said, it's going to be poplar. But now you need to draw the lines, the horizontal lines where this bracing will be placed. There will be 4 braces on the front side of this instrument. And for the 2 horizontal braces, you want to place a horizontal line measuring from the top of the ukulele. It will be 1 13/16 of an inch, and your second horizontal line will be at 4 13/16 of an inch. So go ahead and mark those horizontal lines on your ukulele blank. Well, you've got those horizontal lines marked for the bracing. You've got your hole or your center marked for the hole for your sound hole, and now we're going to go ahead and drill that sound hole. Accuracy counts here, guys, so get your glasses on if you need them, and just take your time. Don't be tempted to use something like a Forstner bit to drill this hole. You'll experience a lot of tear out with that. You're better off to use something like a hole saw where you can just go gently and work your way through the material. So cut from the outside of the soundboard to the inside. That way, if you do accidentally get a little bit of tear out, at least it's going to be on the inside of your instrument and not on the face where it's just blasting everybody in the eyes and that's all they see. We've got that hole cut and managed to get very, very little tear out. So I'm pleased with that. A tiny little light sanding took care of anything that was askew there, you might say. Don't go too crazy on sanding that sound hole. You don't want to misshapen it out of round. And now what we're going to do is take this blank over to the scroll saw and we're going to cut it out to just outside of the outside line that we traced. Do not cut on the line. We're going to be trimming this with the router in just a little bit, and we need something to trim. So cut just outside the line, maybe anywhere from a 32nd, to a 16th of an inch outside of that line. Well, we've got the profile of the ukulele cut out, and we're just outside of the lines for the routing that has to be done later. But at this point in time now, we've chosen the wood we're going to use for the bracing. We need to cut the stock for that. And we're going to be cutting it 3/16 of an inch by 3/8 of an inch. The length will be varying. The length is determined by the interior dimensions of your ukulele. So for now, we're going to head over to the table saw, rip some lengths of poplar 3/16 by 3/8 of an inch. Well, the rough shape is cut, the hole is cut for the soundboard, and of course our bracing pieces are cut. Now, those horizontal lines that we put here on the inside of the ukulele for our bracing, we need to measure now that we've traced the inside profile around. We need to measure now what the distance is across here. And it looks like for mine, I should be in good shape if I go ahead and cut 2 pieces at 4 inches long of this bracing material. Well, we have our bracing cut to the 4-inch length that is suitable for my particular build. And we just want to apply a little bit of glue to the 3/16 of an inch side and spread that around on there, and we're going to glue down these braces onto our soundboard. And of course you've already put the lines on there to show you where they go. So go ahead and glue these up, and then what we're going to do is put a flat board on top of this with some weight and just let it set up, let it dry. We've got some more work to do on these braces, but we really need to let these dry up properly. So just, I don't know, go get some lunch or something. And there it is with just a little bit of weight on it. And we'll just leave this until it's dry. Like I said, maybe I'll go get some lunch, and I'll see you guys afterwards. Well, while we're waiting for those to dry up, we're going to need 2 more pieces of bracing for this front soundboard. And those are going to be 3.5 inches long. You're going to need 2 of them. So I'm going to take some of the bracing material, go over to the table saw, and cut a couple pieces at 3.5 inches. We've got those 2 pieces of bracing cut, and let me see if I can explain how they go on. The lower horizontal brace, you need to measure down 1/4 of an inch from that. As well, from the center line, you have to measure out 1/2 inch. And then at the bottom, at the end of where that brace will be, it's 1 7/16 of an inch from the center line. It kind of goes on an angle. So on this angle, there'll be a 1/4 inch space, 1/2 inch from center, and at the bottom, 1 7/16. You could put all kinds of measurements here, but I'm going to show you how to use some setup blocks to do it. So here we are over at the bench, and I know that little segment there was confusing, and I have to wonder if it wasn't meant to be. But what we're going to do is mount these new braces that I've said, and they go like this, basically. But I'm going to show you how to use setup blocks to do this. So this is a 1/4 inch setup block, and I said that it has to be 1/4 of an inch down from this horizontal brace. So I've placed a 1/4 inch setup block there to give us the spacing of the 1/4 inch. And I've got glue applied to this brace, and I also said that at the top it had to be 1/2 an inch out. So here's my 1/2 inch setup block, and I'm just going to line this out, or line it up on the center line, so I know where my 1/2 inch mark is. I said the bottom had to be 1 7/16, so I'm just going to line up my 1 inch block here, and here is my 7/16 of an inch block. I'm going to lay that one in place and basically put this up in the corner here. There is our 1 mark. Lower it down until it touches your 7/16 block. So 1/2 inch from the center and the 7/16 block, just like that. And that is your final resting place for that particular piece. And all you have to do now is repeat that on the opposite side of the board. So go ahead and clean up the squeeze out and put that board and that weight back on and give this time to dry up. Well, once your braces are all dry, it's time to start shaping them. What we've done is drawn a line 1 inch in from each of these new braces that we've added as well. And just for a little quick tip, a lot of squares have a 1 inch blade on them. So if you just line up your square with the edge of your wood and draw a line on the inside, you've just marked 1 inch. Yeah, instead of measuring, you know, little shortcut. So we need to start shaping these braces. So you want to get a nice sharp chisel, and what we're going to do is from that 1 inch mark, we're going to start peeling away the material here. What we want to accomplish is a slope that'll go down and almost be flush with our wood on the outside. So I'm going to go ahead and clamp this down so it's not moving so much, and I'm going to shape the one side, and then I'll come back and show you what we're looking at. So essentially this is the shape that we're pretty much looking for on all of the braces. As well, we're going to take our chisel and round off the top along here so that we don't have this sharp edge. We're going to do that on all 4 of these braces, and then we're going to come back and see you and show you what we look like. Well, at this point in the build, we're probably looking at something like this. And there may be more trimming and tuning of these pieces here later on, once we get everything glued together and we're doing some testing. But for now, what we need to do is get this piece here glued onto our body. Well, how this is going to work is that on the front side of our ukulele, we're going to be applying glue all the way around here on the edges of our build, as well as all the way along on this lining. That's the purpose of that lining, is to give us more glue surface. Once we get that done, we're going to place it face down here on the ukulele blank that we've cut, and using our center marks to line everything up, and using our traced outline that we did earlier, we're going to center up the sides of this body onto the ukulele front. After that, we're going to apply weight onto this, and clamps if we have to make sure that we have a good solid seal and a good solid joint all the way around the perimeter of the instrument. But one thing that we are going to do is we're going to kind of cheat a little bit for alignment so that this thing doesn't slide once we start clamping. And I'm going to show you what we're going to do with that. Well, what we have is some small little brad nails sort of thing, finishing nails. And we're just going to take one on each side and just ever so slightly sink it into our heel and our neck block. You don't have to drive it all the way home, just a little tiny bit into there. It doesn't even need to be centered. You just want to have it so that it securely into this particular end and this end here. From there, get yourself a pair of wire cutters and cut these nails off so that they're pretty much flush to the base of this heel and neck block. And you can just see that there, it just barely protrudes over the wood surface. And what that's going to do is it's going to dig into the front face or the soundboard of our ukulele and prevent it from shifting once we start clamping down on it. So let's go ahead, apply the glue to all of the lining and all of the edges of the ukulele and get this face glued on. And there we have all the glue applied, and like I said, just line this up with your marks as best you can, of course. And once you're sure that everything is lined up, just get a dead blow mallet or something to that effect and give a wrap on each one of these end blocks to set that nail in that you put in place. And now we can go around and clamp this, and it shouldn't really move out of place anywhere. So I'm going to go ahead and clamp it up, and then I'll come back and see you. And with this now clamped up, I'm going to go around with some Q-tips, and I'm going to clean the squeeze out off of this thing and clean it up a little bit while it's clamped up like this. Alright, so all the squeeze out is cleaned up for the most part as best as I could working around those clamps anyway. I didn't worry too much about the squeeze out on the inside as much as what I did on the outside of the instrument. If you're wondering what good glue-up music is, I found that Peter Frampton was pretty awesome to listen to while I was doing that glue-up today. So there you go. Throw on some Frampton and go nuts with the glue bottle. That didn't sound right. Anyway, once this is dried up, we're going to do one more step for today's show, and this step scares the living crap out of me. But as long as you follow a few simple rules, I think we'll be all right. And I'm going to run through those rules with you right now. Well, I am going to do my absolute best to explain this without confusing every one of you and myself included. I'm showing here the profile of the ukulele. And what we need to do is we need to use the flush trim router bit as the same bit that we use to make our forms earlier in this series. But we need to use that to trim our oversized soundboard to the sides of our ukulele. The problem is that router bit, or any flush trim router bit, is not a gentle being. It can and will every opportunity tear the living snot out of your work, especially for a delicate piece like this, where you're actually only routing 5/64 of an inch of material of thickness, or for my metric friends, 2 millimeters. So I'll try to explain this as best we can, and I'll use a black marker here so hopefully everyone can see. This little guy right here, this is representing our router bit. And our router bit would rotate this way, looking down on it in the router table. So this is counterclockwise, it will rotate. The problem is our ukulele's grain goes lengthwise, just like this. And as you come around this corner, as you get to these sections right here, that rotation is going to dig into that end grain and snap off or break these grain pieces. As well as it comes around this edge here, it will hook in as the grain goes this way. That bit will dig in and tear and snap these pieces away, giving a very poor edge. So you have to keep in mind how to route this and where the rotation will be. So let's just start from the beginning. This edge here, you are okay with the rotation to trim all the way until you get to here. So from here down to here, you're good to go. Don't route anything after that. Stop. Then from here down to the middle, all the way along, as long as the rotation is going fine, you're good to go. Don't go further than this point, because now you're getting into this end grain. And as this rotation comes around, it will tear it out and break it. So take your piece away from the bit and start routing from here to here. So for this piece here, you're okay. You're good to go on the routing. And then from here, basically to the middle of the uke, all the way around, you're good to go. So what do you do for the rest of it? Well, I'm going to tell you what you do for the rest of it. But basically, you do what's called climb routing. So after you're done all of these sections where you're good to go, you want to reverse your direction. So start from this section and route this way. And then from this point, you route this way. From here, you route this way. And here, it goes this way. And if you don't quite understand why that is that it works, it's because as it's coming this way, you're nibbling the material like that. With this way here, with the bit turning this way, you've got the support of the bit all the way along here, and it's just kind of nicking that front edge. So if you take it slow, you'll get a much cleaner edge by climb routing or reverse routing those sections that I just pointed out. I really hope I haven't confused you with that, but it'll go a long way to giving you a clean looking project, and I just hope that I'm able to follow those rules and not bugger up my project. Okay, so now that I've got those rules run by you, hopefully you followed that. Let's get that flush trim router bit into the router table, and we're going to go ahead and router out our top or our front soundboard flush with the sides of our ukulele. Well, before I start this, I just want to show you how we're going to route it. I've explained it on paper, but now I'll show you if I can here. So step one, from here, routing down to right about there, and that's where we're going to stop. Step two is from the top of this curve down around to the center of the ukulele. Step three will be from the center of this curve up into the center of our waist of the instrument. And step four will be from here all the way around to the center of the heel. Now everything else will run the opposite direction. So you'll start from here then and work around this way. And the same with all the remaining cuts. So let's go ahead now and route this, and well, I'm going to hope for the best. check that baby out. Look at that. Isn't that sexy? Huh? Nicely trimmed up, looks great, feels great. It really, getting that front soundboard on there really pulls things together and really makes this thing feel rock solid. There is a couple little imperfections that I did notice, and one of them is in the routing here. There's a tiny bit of an overhang. Might be 1/64th if I'm lucky, you know, but I'm going to trim that up later, maybe with some hand sanding. But for now, I mean, we've come a long way today. This is looking great. This is looking more and more like an instrument every time we come back. But that will be wrapping it up for this week's show. Guys, I want to thank you once again for tuning in. I don't know what to say. This is going great. I'm loving this little thing. So I'm going to see you guys again next week with part 7 and yet another woodworking video. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Well, I know how this show works, and I know what kind of eyes my viewers have. You guys notice everything. So you may have noticed some discrepancies in today's show, mostly with the bracing on the front of the soundboard there of the ukulele. And for those of you that are wondering, yeah, there's 2 ukuleles, and there's a reason for that. When I first started this project, I looked at the book, the main book that I was referencing, and it had patterns for the front soundboard, etc. inside this book. And it looked at the time with the dimensioning that it was a 1-to-1 scale. And of course I put countless hours into it, made the forms, bent everything up, did the routing, did the bracing, etc. based on this one particular drawing, and then found out majorly into the project that it is actually 6% too small. And what does 6% look like? This is what 6% looks like. The larger one here on this side is the new form for the ukulele, and this one here is the old. It actually translates to be about 1/4 of an inch around the entire instrument, too small. So even though I was countless hours into the project, I started over and I made a completely new instrument, completely new forms, completely new everything, new lining, new bracings, the entire bit, scaling off the newly enlarged 6% drawing. And what you end up with is what you will see from here on in the build. And of course I had to go through and edit the video, taking new segments with the new build to reflect the new measurements. So guys, some of you may be thinking, really, for 1/4 inch around? He was that far into it. You're right, but that's the difference between a woodworker and a hack. At some point in time, you need to stop telling yourself that, you know what, that's good enough. And you need to push it further and cut your losses and say, I'm a woodworker and I need that to be as perfect as I can possibly be. And what kind of a show host would I be if I presented you guys a project that was actually 1/4 of an inch too small all the way around? Live and learn. Check your drawings, guys. Check your measurements. Not to worry though, we've got everything corrected and it's full steam ahead. Everything from here back has all been corrected. We all have the proper measurements that we're working from now, and it's carry on, business as usual. So thanks again, guys, and if you did notice the bracing being all different, good for you. That's the way it all starts. Eagle eye it is. See you later.